It's the Y'all Show, talk with a southern accent, and it's time to go to our barbecue barrister, Matt Heermans. Here on the Y'all Show, we talk about food and so much more as we get our barrister to drop by. And on this report from the barrister, it ought to be a darn good one because we're going to be talking about not only barbecue, but a portion of the South that he actually knows a little bit about, even lived in Tyler, Texas for a brief period. And the barbecue barrister is back on with us. Welcome in, Matt Heermans, to the Y'all Show, sir.
Hello, John. Happy to be here, and yeah, I'm happy to talk some East Texas.
Well, we're on a virtual tour of East Texas. This is our spring swing tour of Tyler, Texas. And Matt Heermans, you lived there in the Tyler area briefly at one point. You pass in and out of Tyler on a frequent basis. So when we decided to bring Tyler, Texas as part of our spring swing tour, we knew we had to include you in on the fun. Hopefully that won't be too burdensome for you.
Well, it certainly will not be, and you're right. I'm very familiar with Tyler, Texas. I did live there for a while, and my mother's entire side of the family at one point in time lived on the same county road in Wood County, which is right near Tyler. Tyler would be the quote-unquote a big town close to Wood County. So I grew up going to Tyler. That was the big city whenever I was up there. And now my folks live right outside Tyler full-time on 22 acres in East Texas. So I have a fond, warm feelings for Tyler and the East Texas region.
All right. Well, what about Tyler and East Texas? Do you have a fond recollection of the food and the barbecue of Tyler and East Texas?
Well, there, being in East Texas, there has certainly never been really a shortage of barbecue joints, but there's a standout. East Texas style barbecue we can maybe get into that specifically here in a second, but there is some great barbecue in Tyler. In fact, Stanley's BBQ is a famous place and really, really good. In fact, one of my favorite places in the state, maybe my favorite place in the state. I don't know, it's hard to say, but
Stanley's
BBQ is a very cool place. It is it's kind of a little dive joint. I don't know what it used to be. It's been a barbecue place for a very long time, but it looks like it's just been kind of built on from a shack, and it's grown. It's a very unique spot and pretty old school East Texas style barbecue. But I would recommend anybody traveling through that area. It's definitely worth a stop. It's a great spot.
So what exactly is East Texas style barbecue, Mr. Barrister?
Yeah, that's a subject I love. So Texas is large, obviously, and there are different regions of the state. And when people say Texas barbecue, generally, what they're talking about is Central Texas barbecue. That's what they mean, and that is a place centered around, Austin, Lockhart. Lockhart's probably the most famous one. Luling. There are these little towns surrounding kind of the Central Texas portion of the state. Dripping Springs, these areas west, south of Austin. And that's what you think of as Texas barbecue, or that's what people talk about as Texas barbecue. And that's really the only thing they talk about as Texas barbecue. So that is beef-based. Beef brisket is the reigning king of Central Texas barbecue, as everyone already knows. Salt, pepper, and oak, call that Dalmatian mix because you've got the salt and the pepper, the color of a dog breed. And then it's always oak. It's always oak wood. That's Central Texas barbecue. Beef brisket, salt, pepper, oak wood. That's it. That's what it is. It's a really great way to do beef brisket, but that's only one portion of the state. So although the most famous, that is the one portion. So East Texas is a little bit different. East Texas, you're talking more of a kind of a traditional Southern type barbecue. You're going to find ribs, you're going to find pork butt, you will of course find brisket as well, but you're going to find a lot of barbecue sauce. That's another thing that people say Texas style barbecue. People say Central Texas style barbecue. It's you don't think of barbecue sauce, and people will say, well, we don't have sauce. You can't have sauce. If it needs sauce, it's garbage barbecue, and if you eat sauce, dumb or whatever. That's all Central Texas stuff, man.
Sounds like Texas needs to have a civil war between the barbecue. One of those two factions needs to come out on top.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think when it comes to national perception, for sure, that's kind of what people think of. But yeah, I think people in Texas love barbecue sauce. But anyway, that's the Central Texas thing, and that's what people recognize. Like salt, pepper, oak, brisket, don't get the sauce away. Restaurants don't serve sauce, blah, 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 blah. East Texas, totally different. It's not going to be post oak based as far as the wood. It's going to typically be hickory based or pecan. Maybe other fruit woods. You'll find people using peach. More of a traditionally just kind of normal Southern style barbecue. More complex rubs. Salt, pepper, and oak. Not a thing in East Texas. People love barbecue sauce there, sweet sauce, hot sauce. You'll see more traditional sides, cornbread, greens, stuff like that, as opposed to, just a plate with meat on it, maybe some white onions like you would in Central Texas. It's just different, sweeter. Definitely ribs are a big thing, and like I say, in East Texas, the rubs are sweeter, and the smoke is typically hickory or pecan. And barbecue sauce, definitely not afraid of it. In East Texas, people love the sweet sauce to put on their meat. So that's a pretty good little primer of kind of those two different, what you would call styles of barbecue.
Matt Heermans is our barbecue barrister, and one thing that I just did not hear you rattle off, barbecue barrister, when you talked about what's in East Texas, sounds like something is missing in action in that portion of Lone Star State, and that missing item would be brisket. Is that not a big deal in East Texas?
Oh no, you're going to find brisket. You're going to find brisket in East Texas, absolutely. Yeah, no, beef is always going to be there. The difference would be in it. You order at a barbecue joint anywhere in East Texas, what you're going to find is thinly sliced, lean brisket pieces with barbecue sauce, and that's what you're going to find. Or you're going to find chopped beef, which is basically barbecue sauce with some meat mixed into it. In Central Texas, for instance, you're not going to find that. It's going to be thicker slices of meat. A lot of time it's going to be the point of the brisket, which is the fattier part. We've talked about that before. In fact, it's the best part of the brisket, in my opinion. But no barbecue sauce on it, thicker slices, fattier meat. Totally different. But you will find brisket everywhere in East Texas as well. Brisket's going to be all over the place. You're just going to find ribs to be more popular, and you're going to find a lot of pork butt as well.
Matt, I know you're a big fan of the Memphis style ribs. How big of a difference? What is the biggest difference between the Memphis style and what you'll find in Tyler and East Texas?
Very different. So, a Tyler, an East Texas style rib, for instance, is going to be, I would call it more of a typically sweet flavor profile, kind of a typically Southern rib, which is going to mean your rub is going to have a lot of sugar in it. Get that caramelization. You'll have the sweet profile. You're going to typically have hickory or pecan smoke, which is very kind of typical of a Southern style barbecue. And you're going to have barbecue sauce, sometimes glazed on it, sometimes poured on it, sometimes on the side, but you're going to have barbecue sauce. That is East Texas style barbecue. When we talk about Memphis style barbecue, totally different. Cooked differently. The dry rub is applied at the end of the rib. You're going to have a very charcoal heavy flavor profile with some light wood mixed in, but very different. Yeah, East Texas is going to be a traditionally Southern style rib, and Memphis is its own unique creature with the rub added at the end, and a dry finish with no barbecue sauce.
I was looking, speaking of rubs and stuff, we just showed a few minutes ago the video coming from Stanley's in Tyler, Texas, and they have 3 sauces that they're pretty high on there at Stanley's. One of those sauces looks to be one specifically for chicken. What do you know about that?
Yeah, I think it's called their Clucker sauce, and they have a couple different varieties. You can actually buy it in some stores. Stanley's becoming kind of a barbecue icon throughout kind of the eastern half of the state. So it's pretty good. I can say I have some in the fridge. It's not bad. They have a very hot variety, which is very hot. And I tend to like some heat. It's very hot. But tangy, you got some black pepper. Um, there's a little bit of creaminess in there that kind of thickens it up. That's the hot chicken sauce. A lot of spices, a little bit of mustard. It's nice. It's a very good sauce. It goes well with chicken, and yeah, that's a great illustration. So Stanley's markets barbecue sauce. They're very proud of their barbecue sauces, and they're great. You were in Central Texas, they would scoff at that, be like, that's not what you do. So very different. One region is leave your barbecue sauce at the door, and the other one is literally selling their barbecue sauce and proud of it. So that's a pretty good little distinction right there, John.
And you like both styles, but you have nothing against the sauces of the world, and that's why we love our barbecue Barrister. Well, Stanley's may be the most known. I know Texas Monthly routinely has them right up among the top barbecue restaurants in the Lone Star State. And they're not the only ones that you'll find in Tyler and East Texas. I'm going to tell you about a location in Tyler that also is found throughout the state of Texas, and that's Rudy's. Before we get into Rudy's talk, Barrister, right around that Tyler area, anything else from a restaurant standpoint that we need to know from you? What's Barrister approved?
Yeah, well, there's some pretty good eating in Tyler. Kind of, I would say the kind of the authentic, I guess, traditional foodways there in East Texas would be kind of a deep South type of food. One of the great places, if you're ever traveling through Tyler's, is Rick's. Tyler is Rick's on the Square downtown, and it's called Rick's on the Square because it's on the square and it's named Rick's. But very cool spot. A lot of interesting food, great fried chicken, great, collard greens, green beans, biscuits, stuff like that. They also have kind of a Cajun selection with fried catfish and blackened things of that nature. But really cool. Rick's on the Square, great spot. Also a nice little bar if you want to wet your whistle. Really, really, really nice building, really well decorated, and kind of a classy joint. So if you're not feeling barbecue, that's a good place to give it a shot. And if we're hanging out in East Texas eating barbecue, you can't forget the Country Tavern, which is just a little bit east of Tyler. It's in Kilgore, Texas, about a 25-minute drive. Very famous for ribs. They've always been famous for ribs. You got to get ribs. That's what they do. It's like a barn in the middle of the woods. I think they've been open 50 years. Nice, sweet rub, hickory smoke. They're all baby backs. You don't get a choice. Nice kind of complimentary barbecue sauce, but famous joint for ribs. Really good. That's another East Texas classic.
And if you're heading east there toward Kilgore, you're also going to be somewhere in the vicinity of Longview, and I think it's Marshall, Texas, is also right around that Louisiana line. Anything you want to shout out, give them a shout out food-wise in those two little burgs?
Marshall is up northeast a little bit, close to Louisiana. It's actually Marshall's up by Caddo Lake, which is a kind of a beautiful lake that straddles the Texas-Louisiana line. Great fishing and big giant cypress trees, and really, really cool spot. But Marshall's a historic town. Funny thing about Marshall is we won't get too far down the road, but once the capital of Missouri during the Civil War.
Oh, really? I did not know that.
It was the temporary capital of the secessionary forces of the state of Missouri that, of course, did not secede, but it headquartered itself in Marshall, Texas for a while. So Marshall has 7 flags. One of those flags is the Missouri flag.
I did not know that. So you learn something every day here on the Y'all Show. And speaking of those areas toward Marshall, I believe there's another historic town. I don't know if they've got any food we want to brag about, but is it Jefferson, Texas?
Jefferson, yeah, that is a great little town. Kind of a little, very small town, but kind of a little touristy town. Right there on the river. I think it's the Big Cypress River. It was once a riverboat stop. They still have the big riverboat turnaround. I think they call it, forget what they call it, but it's basically a big dugout spot next to downtown Jefferson where the riverboats used to turn around. The turning basin, I think, is what they call it. But Really pretty little town, nice little downtown area, walking shops and food and porches and balconies. Really a place that I think most people in Texas have never even thought about going, certainly have never been to. But really interesting. I would say the closest comparison would be maybe a smaller version of like a Natchez, sort of.
Okay.
Kind of right on the river like that. Old buildings, great downtown. They have carriage rides, stuff like that. Much smaller than Natchez, but kind of that vibe on the again, very close to the Louisiana border.
And as I mentioned earlier, if you're in the Tyler and East Texas area, lots of food options. One place that I want to bring out because it's located not just in East Texas, they have locations throughout the state of Texas, and that's Rudy's. And Rudy's is a place that is the Rudy's Country Store and Barbecue Joint. And Matt, you informed me this is located really in a lot of places across Texas, including in Tyler, Texas. What do you like about Rudy's?
Yeah, Rudy's is a pretty ubiquitous barbecue joint across the state. I mean, if you're in any town that's a little bit bigger than small, you're probably going to have a Rudy's. And Rudy's is a Central Texas style barbecue joint, which means their focus is brisket, salt, pepper, post oak smoke. That's what they do. But they sell different kinds of meats. You can buy ribs there. You can buy, I think they do a pork loin. They do occasionally they do a prime rib. Some of the places will just smoke a prime rib. You can order that meat sliced. But the reason to go to Rudy's would be to get the brisket. That would be why you go into a Rudy's. And they have point and they have flat brisket. And we've kind of covered this before, not to go back into the archives, but point brisket is the fatty, marbled, kind of top part of the brisket on one end. Some people love it. Some people prefer the flat. The flat is a very, very lean part of the brisket. So when you think of sliced brisket, I would imagine 99% of people out there imagine a brisket flat, sliced thin. But the point is really where you want to be on a brisket. So if you ever go to Rudy's, wherever you are, they will have an option for you. It will be moist or lean, and all that means is moist is point and lean is flat. And there's really nothing like a Central Texas style piece of brisket point. Very, very creamy, very tender, very fatty. And if you're one of these people that believes fat is flavor, then you will like that. That's the only part of the brisket I eat. I would give the flat to the dog and keep the point for myself. But that's Rudy's. They're always big, and they've got cold beer and big picnic tables. So it's kind of a good little Central Texas style barbecue joint.
Sounds like our kind of place, in addition to all the great options you'll find in Tyler and in East Texas. Wrapping up our conversation with the barbecue barrister Matt Heermans here on our spotlight of Tyler, Texas. Go to visit Tyler for all kinds of information when it comes to the grub options of Tyler and East Texas. Wrapping up with you, anything else you need to make sure you get off your chest? I haven't heard you mention going to your mama's house as an option.
Well, they're in Golden, Texas. You would you would miss it. You not even a blink. Like if you even thought about blinking, and just the second it would take you to consider a blink, you'd miss Golden. I think it's about 270 people. So,
okay.
Tyler's the big city.
Okay. We understand. Yeah. We understand. And again, lots of great options there, food-wise, in Tyler and East Texas. Barbecue Barrister, thank you very much. It's been a wonderful thing talking to you and having you reminisce about East Texas.
Absolutely. Great spot. Beautiful area as well.
All right. Our barbecue barrister, Matt Heermans. And that will wrap up our conversation. And it will also wrap up our virtual tour of Tyler and Smith County and all of what we have going on in East Texas. I'm John Rawl. Thank you for being a part of our spring swing tour of Tyler and Visit Tyler. And we'll be back with you soon with another episode of the show that's all about the South. This is Y'all Talk with a Southern accent.